So in preparation for our visit to Drumsheugh swimming baths on Monday morning, I'm going to demonstrate some of the materials and approaches that I will be guiding you in when we're there. At the poolside, so I have some grey sugar paper and I'm sketching out, I'm using some photographs here because I'm not been able to go to the pool to make you the video. So I'm working from some photographs, and I'm sketching out with a bit of charcoal some of the fabulous architecture. So it's quite an extraordinary location. These wonderful arches and columns. From an artistic point of view, it's very useful as well because it's got this really lovely limited palette colour scheme of sort of ochre yellows, orangey browns, and then the amazing turquoise of the water. So what I'm going to demonstrate to you is working on this grey sugar paper, sketching out something of some of the lines and possibly even some of the tonal pattern, the light and shade of the main aspects of the architecture of the pool. Then I'm going to spray my drawing and add some colour. And that, of course, is the sort of Degas approach to pastel. I've worked with lines. Sometimes it works quite well to apply areas to apply shapes, tonal shapes. For example, the pool side has this whole pattern of cubicles. So I've used a slightly thicker bit of charcoal to lay them down. So having put down a bit of a pattern of some of these tonal shapes, we've got in my photograph, got a swimmer as well. So there's something to say about swimmers and figures and also about water. But for now, let me just demonstrate putting down something tonal on the grey paper. I'm going to pause while I spray this, and then I'm going to put colour on top. So having sprayed that with hairspray for a fixative and let it dry, this is now sealed. So that surface, that charcoal won't smudge. And also the surface of the paper has a little bit of a tooth to it. So as I apply colour with my chalk pastels, I've got a kind of guide in my lines and tonal shapes. I've also got a sort of tonal underdrawing, which I can actually, if I don't apply the pastel too thickly, or if I put it on in such a way that there's a degree of translucency, then my underdrawing actually can show through and contribute to, oh, there's nothing happening there, contribute to the overall sort of colour scheme, particularly with the darker colours. Often you find that it's in the name. Pastels are often quite light in colour, and so to achieve some of the darker contrast that you might want, having the charcoal underdrawing can be helpful. Here, actually, I want to make sure that these areas of the ochre wall are a bit darker in those spaces because they are behind the arches. So I've just pushed them back with a little bit of, I mixed some a yellow and a sort of yellowy brown. So this is very much blocking in colour, just seeing how these colours work together and putting it on not too heavily. As I've described, it allows the charcoal underdrawing to show through, and it also allows me to get a feel for how the colours work together so that I can, over a gradual process, choose things to stand out, choose things to emphasize, depending on how things develop. And then, as I've said, there's this wonderful kind of turquoise colour of the water. And I also thought that by taking this layered approach of applying first charcoal to the grey paper, fixing it, and then applying colour afterwards, it would be good to use that approach as a way of creating a more convincing effect of the depth of the water. Because when we draw water, particularly in a swimming pool, what we're trying to suggest is not only the surface of the water, where there are reflections and ripples, but also the depth of the water. And by applying my materials in the way that I am, in layers, the drawing itself has a certain depth. You know, if you think of layers in a swimming pool of the surface of the water and the kind of bottom of the pool itself, then by working with the layers of charcoal and pastel and spraying the charcoal and even spraying the pastel along the way, I can create hopefully a convincing sense of the depth of the water. And as you see, I'm not just mixing colour, but I'm reapplying some lighter chalk and even some darker charcoal where necessary, if I want to add some more contrast. So I'll try a second composition, again from some of the photographs that I've found of the pool, and this time I'm going to begin with some pastel colour, and I'm going to lay out some of the shapes of these colours without any outline, without any particular sort of pre-drawing. So that will of course mean a degree of approximation, and that's what I'm keen on, so that the way that I develop this drawing is really via colour shapes. And those shapes, I mean, you see what I've done there with my column, that could be a bit longer. Those shapes will, to a degree, be approximate, and there will therefore be a need to refine them and adjust them. But what tends to happen is that there's only a kind of small amount of adjusting required. Many of these shapes will turn out to be reasonably well judged, and that will mean the sort of adjustments that I'm talking about will hopefully be the more sort of essential adjustments, corrections, whatever you want to call them. And by putting in those adjustments, and only the ones that are really essential, I'll get a much stronger image. So if you like, details or more incidental, less essential aspects of my drawing will be played down, because I'll ignore them. And it's only the things that are really important to what I'm trying to convey or describe. Those are the things that I'll be bringing out. Just as part of this process, I'll bring them out. So I've laid down some colour shapes, and I'm going to strengthen some of them. But I'm going to stay with this approach, just putting down the colours. There's also one of the great features of Drumsheugh baths is this huge sort of arched window at one end of the pool, which is yet another dramatic aspect of the architecture, but it's also something that creates these lovely patterns of light on the water. And there's a little window in there. So by not bothering with outlines and elements of definition, I think I'm also a bit freer to look at colour. Now I think I'll mix in a bit of charcoal here and there, because I'd like to have a slightly stronger pattern of tone. So I've done things, as you can see, the other way around. I started with colour, and then I'm adding a certain amount of tone using the charcoal. So I'm just mixing the charcoal and the pastel together. I want to, for example, get some of the underneath of those arches, give them a little bit more form, and get these columns in the foreground to stand out a bit because of the fact that they're nearer and they're against the light. I haven't got a figure in this one, but hopefully when we're in at Drumsheugh Baths on Monday, there will be some swimmers. We won't have a model, but they know that we're coming, and they're quite happy to have artists on the poolside doing their sketches. So yes, then I can begin to add a bit more contrast and definition. So what I'm going to do to this one is I'm going to spray it before I get any further and look at how the colour behaves once it's been sprayed. So I'm not sure how obvious it is for you seeing the image on the screen, but having sprayed my drawing with fixative, the pastels are sealed, so they don't smudge, hardly at all. And as well as the pastel being sealed so that they don't smudge, the surface of the drawing now has a slightly rougher so-called tooth. And so I can use exactly the same colours, but when I put them back on top, they come out a bit brighter. I don't know if you can see that. The white seems to have faded a little bit, but I can reapply it. And you can see there it's a lot brighter. So this is something that we can use as part of a process. So if there are parts of the drawing that I want to stand out more strongly, for example, maybe the light on this side of the pillar, and I want to do that using brighter colour, well then I just have to be much more selective about how and where I apply the colour. So I'm not going to bring everything out, but I will bring out the parts of the drawing which are important because I want them to be more visible. I want the colour to be brighter in the water, for example, or as I've said, some of that colour on the columns, the brick. Or maybe I want to bring something out because it's in the foreground and I think it should stand forward in the drawing. So here I want to work a bit with some of those reflections. I can actually go on spraying this drawing and letting that process happen again and again, let things sink back a bit and make other things stand out more. And then at the very end of the process, I won't spray the last layer. So, having judged the brightness and the colourfulness of the important parts of the drawing, I would then just leave it without spraying it because I don't want to push anything back once I've achieved the balance that I'm after. So that's a bit of a demonstration of some of the materials and the approaches that we'll use on the pool side at Drumsheugh Baths on Monday. And then the following week, when we're in the studio, I would like to take people through the process of making a pastel painting. So working on this sort of approach, but on a much larger scale, building up layers of pastel and creating some of these emphasis that I've described, getting some of the depth and so on through this layering. Okay, well, see you on Monday. Cheerio.